Our next speaker is Dan Smith, and I'd like to introduce Dan. Dan brings a wealth of experience from his diverse roles across community service, financial planning, and education sectors. He is born and raised in central Queensland, and Dan has chosen to deeply invest in his community. He holds a number of non-executive director roles, and he serves currently as the project manager for the Smiths Family Communities for Children in Rockhampton, where he excels in building community relationships and driving impactful outcomes. His dedication extends to healthcare, where his leadership contributed significantly to the Central Queensland Health and Hospital Service, enhancing local health services and governance. Welcome, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Tina. Thanks everybody for joining me in this online forum, and also for listening to my presentation. I came to be here with you through a personal relationship with Tina. It's sort of one of those sort of storytelling moments in itself that Tina's daughter was starting a journey in the Rural Medical Pathways program, and I had the symbolic joy of sort of presenting her what I think might have been her first stethoscope. So, that was my journey there. Not long after, an interesting relationship developed, and I twisted Tina's arm to actually join me on the board of the Central Queensland Hospital Foundation. So it's all about relationships for me. Many believe relationships are the lifeblood of doing business in community successfully, and so much of what we do depends upon the interconnected bonds both inside and outside of an organisation. There's much research that supports that purpose-driven stakeholder collaboration drives sustainability of effort and delivers more powerful social results. Whilst many stakeholder relationships are still cemented by contracts and written agreements, the need for human-centric, trust-based partnerships is increasingly evident. Most modern organisations recognise this and are investing in stakeholder management strategies. But by understanding and valuing stakeholders holistically, our health services can gain greater benefits, heighten loyalty, increase creativity, real genuine reciprocity. This approach requires initial and indeed ongoing investments in time and trust, but really does provide long-term results. In essence, this sustainable impact that I'd like to reflect upon and share, it really truly hinges on the quality of stakeholder relationships, and it really points to that positive future where collaboration and mutual benefit sort of is really what it's all about. Now, I'm not focusing today on things like the 8 principles of person-centered care, or going to spend time unpacking the factors contributing to delivery of person-centered care. But I really want to acknowledge that those concepts are very important when integrating feedback into health governance systems. Equally, we could invest a lot of time in exploring policies and practices and people. And as the colleague in the previous presenter mentioned about place in Northern Ireland, the place there is very different to my place in Rockhampton in central Queensland, but it really reinforces all of those things in place. What surrounds us, shapes us, it's very important. But the P word that I want to offer my reflective learnings about is another P word, and it's really centering on partnering. Okay. So when I was having a yarn with TJ and the care opinion team, I recalled a Blinkist review of a book called The Stakeholder Strategy by Ian Svensson, and it contained a framework for building stronger, more impactful stakeholder relationships. Now, with that fresh in my mind, I thought that Foster framework could be used to symbolically illustrate much of the health consumer journey and the partnering journey I've experienced over many years. In so many things we do as humans, good relationships emerge as the sticky glue that binds us together. Sometimes it's about swallowing and enjoying a brand of beer like that Foster's that socially you normally wouldn't choose. Sometimes it's not making a fuss about pineapple on a pizza when normally you might like more anchovies instead. But if you just pause for a moment and reflect on your own personal relationships and the dedication, the patience and care that you need to invest intentionally to sustain them. Now, if you apply that sentiment to the world of business, the world of the health as a health consumer, as a health worker, building enduring value-rich connections becomes, it's a dark, complex art. But for me, this is where a framework like Foster can emerge as a beacon, a shining light to shine a path towards creating thriving, reciprocal stakeholder relationships. Yeah, I'm not going to sort of labour too much on the words, but as we go through it, if you begin with F for foundations, imagine you're setting out on a voyage, and wouldn't you first want to ensure that your compass is tuned perfectly? Likewise, with your foundation with stakeholders, you want to ensure that you've got mutual goals, values, and aspirations. Like that's your guiding compass. For the colleagues online, that can be your North Star. In South, in the Southern Hemisphere, there's no Northern Star, so maybe it's a Southern Cross, but it's giving you that common direction in terms of where you're going. It's that initial handshake that you have with people, that mutual nod, that signal of an alignment of shared vision and success. As you sail forward, that organisational alignment comes to the forefront. It's about ensuring your ship that you're sailing in is seaworthy, and it's tailored for the long journey ahead. Now, if you think about for a moment bureaucracies that we all play within at different times, there's policies and there's procedures and there's gatekeepers and there's people, and they're really important. But is that culturally conducive to seamless collaborations? Does it resonate with a shared vision? So really, you got to do work in nurturing your crew, your team, and you got to groom that spirit of partnership and foster an environment where collaboration isn't an afterthought, but it's just an important part of just how you're doing things. It's not something different. Once you have that shared vision and you've got a streamlined organization, then you can look to co-create that shared strategy. Picture two artists with different styles when they're sort of trying to collaborate on a canvas. They're all leveraging their strengths and harmonizing their differences. So really, that's the space, that's the environment that you intentionally need to create, where there's mutual respect and flexibility that allows that partnership to evolve organically, and you can go into those uncharted areas. Lots of symbolism there. But the heart of any relationship beats with trust. And it's not just about agreements and contracts. It's about that unspoken bond, that quiet understanding that forms over time. There's transparent conversations, difficult conversations, actively listening and empathizing. Consumers, stakeholders, they need to be seen not just as part of the process, but as individuals with shared aspirations, concerns, and dreams. As you go along that journey, sometimes the compass needs occasional recalibration, and that's where that evaluation becomes important. It's that an opportunity to reflect, reassess and rejuvenate and reset the targets for where you are going. Might be tactics. It might be a way to sort of sail around some sort of stormy clouds on the horizon. But likewise, the R in Foster, in that acronym, it's really the essence of what it's all about. It's not the start of the process. It's about continuity and repetition. It reminds us that building relationships isn't a sprint, but it's a marathon that sort of takes persistence over time, patience, and a long-term commitment to those core values you got from the start there. It's about planting seeds and not digging up those seeds to see if they've taken root. There's an element of trust there that you've got to wait time for the tree to grow before it starts bearing some fruit. So I think that's important in that space there. Naturally, there's a bit of skepticism in terms of, hey, it's just another wishy-washy framework. But my experience over time is that so much of it's coming back to those authentic relationships that you built and having that shared foundation together. In terms of, I guess a previous speaker spoke about an alignment of values and shared mission. But that real power, the kind of change landscapes doesn't come from different missions and different things. It's about having that shared vision. In central Queensland, we had a destination 2030 plan. We had a journey with a consumer and advisory committee that developed, and we had different points of how to get to A to B, and there was lots of different paths one could take. There were steps that we took that weren't the right steps to take, but it was just a learning journey. We were actually taking action. Over time, that shared social mission became a bit like a lighthouse and drew people in with its glow. And our journey together in our community is really testament to that perseverance and that patience. Over time, different missions became sharper and clearer and more aligned, and that ended up leading to the formation of our Central Queensland Hospital Foundation. What we've now got at the moment with CQ Shines, there's that shared vision there to facilitate better health and brighter futures for Central Queenslanders. So if I throw to another analogy for a moment, that Rome wasn't built in a day, but all the time they're laying bricks each and every hour. So that's that persistence, that ongoing patience. But the other thing we've got to be careful of in that reflection is it's not about having fancy documents or shiny brochures. It's about being authentic to what we're doing here. You might have all the best fancy words in the world, but if the actual actions you take sort of cause concern and cause shadows of doubt, it just won't stay in the relationships. You've got to be authentic, have conviction, and can keep building on those bridges of trust there, and it'll stand the time of stormy weather as well. An earlier statement that I alluded to, it's worth repeating now. The heart of any relationship beats with trust. So it's not about formal agreements and contracts, it's about that unspoken bond. It's that quiet understanding that forms over time. It's nurtured by transparent conversations, by difficult conversations, by actively listening and empathizing, by seeing stakeholders, consumers, health workers. They're all key parts of the jigsaw puzzle that comes together, but also recognizing that they're all individuals with their own aspirations, concerns, and dreams. The speaker before sort of mentioned about measuring and recording. It's important that when you're doing your metrics and measurements, they're not just figures on the paper. For me, they should be seen as a signpost on a journey, and recognize that that journey is not a solitary one just for one entity. It's about everybody involved in that partnership there together. If you've got guiding structures, let them guide and shape the path that you need to go along. And if the path needs to bend to go around a few things at different stages, navigate those turns together. The partnering I'm sort of reflecting on describing, it's about where there's integrity meeting sustainability, where diversity dances with inclusion. In such an environment, those partnerships don't just exist, but they can flourish and produce great things like the Central Queensland Hospital Foundation CQ Shines. For me, it's a perfect example there of a shared social mission that has developed over a long time. This is 11, 12, 15 years that we're talking about in terms of it forming and coming to where it is now. In terms of your measurements, it's not about capturing numbers, but it's about getting that social mission into your daily operations. And that does take time, and it takes consistency of purpose from the top tier executives right down to your grassroots people in terms of the volunteers pushing around the trolleys in the health service. But in my mind, the natural flow of everything beats with relationship building. It's about engaging in continual dialogue with stakeholders and ensuring that strategies remain relevant, and it keeps on resonating with the evolving interests that might occur over time as well. Before I mentioned showcasing, so that's really important as a reflection there, that don't shy away from the spotlight. Make sure that stories get chronicled, celebrate the wins, celebrate the challenges, and through those reports that can reflect and resonate and inspire other people to sort of come on that journey with you as a consumer. We all have annual reports that we need to write. Sometimes they're very boring, staid governance documents. But in the process of developing those reports, don't have it as just a purely yearly governance ritual that you do. Use it as a stop check moment to reflect on the health of your partnerships, your health on your stakeholders. Keep people involved in that partnering effort, and use it as a way to stay anchored to that shared mission, even when it's perhaps not as healthy as you'd like it to be. The ultimate goal is to remain transparent and accountable, and not just try and achieve national quality standards, but to do the right thing each and every day and drive enduring success. For me, if I was reflecting on looking forward and looking back and reflecting on my sort of key lessons over time, it really is that this foster framework I spoke about before, it's not in the start of the beginning, it's in that repetition. With so many things I'm involved in, and even things I'm easing out of my involvement at the moment, it reminds me that building relationships isn't a sprint, but it's an ongoing long-term investment that you need to keep on fertilizing the seeds of the relationship. You need to build rapport with the new people that come into key roles, and it's just that ongoing commitment to sort of keep things moving along. Again, there's my details, but I'm a strong believer that the way that you foster your relationship with stakeholders through collaborative partnering is of the utmost importance. If we can move away from transactional thinking about the next report, the next standards you need meet, or the inquiry into a particular incident, it's all about getting those mutually beneficial stakeholder partnerships. Like for me, one of the key things that prompted me to get involved in the health system was my son had basically he was like a pincushion. There was multiple attempts of trying to get a cannula reinserted after his veins had closed. Now, I was a bit privileged because I was in a number of different committees. I could actually sort of see what happened with the feedback that I provided at that stage, that they changed policies. They had no more than 2 attempts, and then the ultrasound machines had to be used to sort of actually insert the things into his veins. But if I wasn't actively involved as a consumer as I was, I would never have known about what was going on. So for me, that's where it's also great to have these online platforms for people that might not have had the same confidence that I do to actually speak up as a consumer. So it's wonderful. For me, stay engaged, use frameworks like this to sort of keep on playing, start small if need be. It's all about the trust, it's all about the journey. But I think the important thing is just to actually start in the first place. Don't wait until you've got the perfect system. Take a step and then take another step. And that's probably my key reflections for now, Tina, if I can. Lots of other moments of truth and storytelling I could go on to. I love a lovely story, but that's what I thought I'd share for today. That's game over for me.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Dan.
Thank you so much, Dan. It's been fantastic to hear your insights, and particularly coming from your experience where you've been in the healthcare system as a consumer representative and advocate, as a businessman. You've got history there as a chairman of a hospital foundation trust, and also as a parent of a child who had some pretty significant health challenges there, where you did need to stand up, because we know that what we often hear is from consumers who don't realise that they've got that power, that they have their right to be heard. And so that's incredibly powerful what you've shared with us. We've just been, monitoring the chat at the moment. We don't have any questions, but we do sort of more have some comments coming through. And I think it's interesting when you talk about that foster model and the partnering. One question I would have, I suppose, is we often see the idea, particularly with the feedback, of almost a set and forget mentality can occur, where you provide the mechanism, but do you think there's a role for more active engagement, where organisations can be trying to sort of reach their patients through conversations about experiences?
Definitely, yes. Like for me, it's about sort of providing that pathway for people to do that. If they're not confident doing that personally themselves, I think that's when we can have more focus groups, we can have more interest groups, we can have people in a space of psychological safety together to actually sort of share. And when people tell stories, other people might be more prepared to sort of share their stories and their learnings and things that come out as well. So that's my very long answer to sort of say yes, I definitely agree with the thing that you sort of planted as a conversation starter.
Yeah, that's right. So I encourage people to keep the comments and questions coming through, because sometimes there are, some barriers of staff not feeling empowered necessarily to go out and ask those questions as well. And that's something we'd like to explore as we go along.
Thanks, Beck, and thanks again, Dan, for sharing the foster model, which I'm sure others are used to in terms of using it, or elements of it in conjunction with other stakeholder collaborative models, and pointing out to us that relationships, partnerships, collaboration are vital for any meaningful undertaking, and partnering with consumers is of utmost importance. And there's nothing more empowering than sharing your story and then knowing that someone is keenly listening and going to use it for learning and improvement. And that is what we aim to do with Care Opinion, to empower the consumer to be able to do that, and work with the health services to meaningfully use the feedback for learning and improvement.